Good morning and welcome to A Morning Conversation. I'm Robin Winslow. It's Deafblind Awareness Week and I'm very, very happy to welcome a group of people from Able Australia, the CEO of Able Australia, Celestine Hare. Hello Celestine, how are you going?
Good morning, Robin. Yes, I'm fine, thank you.
And also joining us are two clients of Able Australia, Heather Lawson, and Heather is going to work with Kathy, her interpreter, to have the interview with us today. Good morning, Heather. How are you going?
Good morning, Robin. Yes, as you said, I'm Heather Lawson. I'm a deafblind woman.
I'm also very pleased to welcome Michelle Stevens, and Michelle is another client of Able Australia.
Hello,
Michelle is working with Dennis, her interpreter, today.
Hello, sorry about that, Robin. Good morning. This is Michelle Stevens here. I'm a lady who was born blind and later on lost by hearing as a result of some serious illness. I'm very happy to be a part of your program.
And we're going to get both yours and Heather's life stories today as well, because I'm fascinated by that. But I'd like to start, welcome all of you, and I would like to start with Celestine to just give us a bit of a background to Deafblind Awareness Week, what Able Australia is hoping to achieve from this week.
Able Australia always hopes to achieve building an awareness about the significance of vision hearing loss or deafblindness within Australia. And every year, at the end, the last week of June, we celebrate this week by delivering a number of interviews and building a community awareness. It's the forgotten disability as far as we're concerned, because there's been very little published about deafblindness or vision hearing loss.
Look, I have to agree, and some of the figures from your media release were really quite astounding. Basically, we're looking at more than 288,000 Australians already living with sight and hearing loss, and you're predicting that that will go to more than 1 million Australians by 2050.
That's correct, Robin. And if you add another disability to that, like a physical disability or a psychological disability, we're up to 3 million people by 2050, and that's staggering.
And I'm presuming we'll get into this a bit later, but clearly one of the issues facing an organisation like Able Australia is going to be funding and how you support that many Australians going forward. But before we go there, I would actually just like to start with Heather. Now, Heather, you've been a quite extraordinary deafblind woman, from what I can see, in terms of your emphasis on abseiling and rock climbing and skydiving and so on. What drives you to that?
Well, I like to be an adventurous person. I enjoy adventure. I like to experience different activities, as you said, like rock climbing and abseiling, jet skiing, snow skiing, skydiving, hiking. I just love to be doing adventurous things. Now, the way I started that, I never used to know, I didn't understand, as a person with a vision impairment and being deaf, having ushers, there was a lot of things I missed out on that I could not see outside my frame of vision. So I went and did some mobility training and learnt how to use my cane and improve my confidence and be able to be guided by people, how to read Braille, and it really increased my confidence and my ability to get out and do things for myself. So then, as I built up my confidence and my trust in other people, I started to think about the different things I'd like to do, and I've been really successful. I have to say that mobility training really helped me a lot to be able to get out there and do things.
Now, you started life with Usher syndrome, so you started life without hearing, but you did start life with sight, didn't you?
That's right. I'll explain to you what happened to me. I was born deaf, and then later on my sight deteriorated. When I was about 13 or 14, they found that I had the retinal pigmentosa from seeing the doctor. And then in my 20s, my sight started to deteriorate, and it became harder and harder for me to see. Now, I'm one of many, many people in the world that have Usher syndrome. There's quite a lot of people like that are born deaf but are sighted, and then later on have decreased sight. So I grew up in the deaf community. Auslan is my first language. But now that I have sight problems as well, I use sign language, but with people touching my hands so I can feel the signs rather than see them.
And now that was going, when we first set up this interview, my question to Matt at Able Australia was, how do the interpreters work? Because in my ignorance, and I suspect I represent a lot of people in the community, I had no idea how tactile signing could work. How different is it from... Was it difficult to transition to tactile signing?
Well, as I said, I grew up with Auslan, so I knew Auslan. As I lost my sight, I started to learn that using my hand on a person's hands, I could feel the same signs, so I could still feel the movements. It was just a different way of feeling the movements rather than seeing them, and I like it. It works for me.
That's great. Now, I do want to just bring Michelle in here, because, Michelle, your story is a bit different to Heather's. Can you explain what your life path has been?
Okay, thank you, Robin. I grew up as with a severe vision impairment, so my story's slightly different to Heather's. I grew up with a vision impairment. I went to blind school and grew up in the blind community. Although as a child I had a lot of ear infections and a lot of ear trouble, and I was diagnosed with a mild to moderate hearing loss due to my problems. My vision loss is a result of having too much oxygen as a baby, premature baby. I was born very, very tiny, and I had to undergo a lot of oxygen to keep me alive. My hearing problems gradually got worse as I nearly died with a disease that I lost all of my residual hearing.
How old
back
were you then?
1991. I would have been in my early 30s. So the reason why I can speak, because I grew up with speech, and I had enough hearing then to learn what speech was all about. As a child growing up, I experienced what it's like to have music, and later on I received, which I've had now for about 17 years, of old cochlear implants, but I actually prefer to have sign so I can communicate with people, because I miss such a lot of conversation. I only understand a few words out of the sentence. So in actual fact, I actually have been considered as an acquired deafblindness for just over 17, perhaps 18 years.
So how difficult was that transition for you when you lost your second sense?
Oh no, it was very, very difficult. As Heather had to struggle with her losing her sight, I had the opposite. I had to struggle coping with losing my hearing. Now, I was a trained musician and studied overseas in the UK at the Royal National College for the Blind. You can imagine, and I think I can sort of have some idea of how Beethoven must have felt when he lost his hearing, that it was a very, very devastating time for me. Fortunately, we have Able Australia, although then Able Australia was formerly known as the Deafblind Association, and when I was diagnosed with my hearing problems, I had to have many operations after my illness. That meant that they had to take some disease out of that was in my ears, and that meant that after the radical mastoidectomies that I had in my ear, I lost any residual hearing.
But now you still play
I think one of the most
piano.
frustrating things, Robin, is that it was really difficult trying to accept, but Able Australia's case management and professionals that worked with me helped me to sort of get over the really difficult times. I'm not saying it's easy, but with that extra help that they gave us was something that was very, very important.
And now part of that help is you've been encouraged and I think enabled to continue to play the piano, is that right?
Yes, Able Australia provides a program known as music therapy. That's one of my favourite programs I'm involved with, which I absolutely adore. Although piano, people quite often say to me, Robin, what does the piano sound like through a synthesized speech processor that I use for my cochlear implant? And I say to people, it sounds very, very strange. It's very synthetic. But however, without my implant, I'm totally deaf. So in actual fact, it's better to have something than nothing.